Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would review this little video and talk about this subject that I thought was very particularly interesting. And this is going to be a video that I'm going to review, a very short video by that of Mr. DontaesBoxingNation, who, of course, I like to review because, in my view, I think a lot of the times that and just in my view, that he puts a lot of biased commentary out there, especially that might have a little bit of racial bias. And apparently, according to the news in this video, Mr. Gervonta Tank Davis, who I think is one of the greater talents out there, and is probably one of the better pound for pound stars, or at least all in all, one of the bigger stars in that of boxing. But I'm not really quite sure if I can acclaim that he's one of the greater pound for pound boxers or pound for pound fighters out there. And the reason why I say that is because I just don't really know that much about him based on his resume. And a lot of people, they might highly disagree with me here. And I'm sure there's going to be a certain amount of Gervonta Tank Davis fans that claim that, oh, you're wrong. Gervonta Tank Davis, he beat this guy and beat this guy. He's top 5, top 3 pound for pound. How could you not possibly have him on your top 10 pound for pound list? Well, the thing is that when I take a look at my top 10 pound for pound list right now, when you take a look at that top 5 to top 6 pound for pound list, you're talking about that of probably Naoya in no particular order. You're talking about Naoya Inoue, who of course is a legitimate 4-weight division champion and has become undisputed in 2 separate weight classes and recently defeated Stephen Fulton this year, who probably would have been a top 20 pound for pound fighter and a legitimate overall somewhat of a unified champion when it comes down to it, or at least held 2 belts in that weight division. You have that of Terrence Bud Crawford, who also, and of course, was the first man to become undisputed in 2 separate weight classes, and he has gotten wins over the likes of Sean Porter, Gamboa, Postal, and of course, that great win over Errol Spence Jr. You have that of Canelo Alvarez. Of course, his resume and his skill set pretty much speaks for itself, as long as you're not from the LDBC and new media who constantly try to tear him down. Of course, you have Usyk as well, who is up there. You have Tyson Fury, Devin Haney, and then below those guys, you probably have people like Archie Beterbiev, Dimitri Bivol, Teofimo Lopez, Shakur Stevenson. There might be some other guys that I'm potentially missing. The problem is with Gervonta Tank Davis, and I love Gervonta Tank Davis as a fighter. I think that he debatably is the most talented fighter around those weight divisions, around the 135 to 130 to 140 weight divisions. Potentially more talented than Stevenson, potentially more talented than Devin Haney, potentially more talented than these guys. But there's only so much that I can do off of potential, because this is a lot of the times what I like to call that of the Mike Tyson or the Aaron Rodgers or the Anthony Davis syndrome, where so many people, and I always kind of say this is a saying that I've said a lot, where so many people take a look at the talent of a fighter that they like to take a look at what they can do because of their talent, that they don't actually take a look at what they did. And when it comes down to it, for example, many people were claiming for the longest time that Aaron Rodgers was the greatest quarterback in NFL history and that he was better than Tom Brady and greater than Tom Brady. And, all the excuses would come in when he would never win these Super Bowls or really not even make it to the Super Bowl in the first place. He only made it to the Super Bowl 1 year. Every other year, at least in some of those years, were somewhat of a disappointment. Anthony Davis, many people predicted him to be the next best center of the league, but he ended up getting surpassed by people like Giannis Antetokounmpo, Nikola Jokic, and even a little bit by Joel Embiid. I mean, sure, Anthony Davis right now has an NBA championship, but he was not the main value piece. He was not the main leader of that team. It was LeBron James. And if we're really going to go there about Anthony Davis, without LeBron James, what really is his playoff record? The man has only ever won 1 playoff series, and he only ever made the playoffs twice, with that of the New Orleans Pelicans within that of like an 8 to 9 year span. I mean, that's really pathetic. So the point is that Gervonta Tank Davis, when I take a look at him, and I don't really know how great he's going to end up becoming. I don't know how great his resume is going to end up. I don't know if he'll be remembered as, the greatest ever, or at least the greatest of his generation. I don't know what's going to happen. But what I do know is that Gervonta Tank Davis is nearing the age of 30, if he's not 30 already. And on top of that, within his next fight, if he gets that win, which I assume more than likely that he's going to be 30-0. And at the end of the day, when I really just take a look at his resume, and I've been critical of some other resumes as well, including that of Terrence Bud Crawford, at times Naoya Inoue, some other fighters that, might be on the pound for pound list or have a claim to be on the pound for pound list or, debatably that number one pound for pound spot. But even those fighters, whatever you want to say about their resume, the thing about Inoue and the thing about Terrence Bud Crawford is that they had their big 50-50 fight last year. And on top of that, they're legitimate 3 or 4 weight division champions. They haven't just won regular or interim titles within that of most of their weight divisions. And at the end of the day, I love Gervonta Tank Davis as a fighter. I think that he's highly entertaining. I just don't really know how real he is. I think that he's a great fighter. I think that he's a great talent. And I would bet on him to win against most of those, bigger matchups around those weight divisions. But at the end of the day, I cannot put a fighter, at least at the current moment in time, within my top 3 to top 5 pound for pound list. And I can't even put him on my top 10 pound for pound list. Because at the current moment in time, it's like, who do you really have in terms of wins? People can talk all day about, oh, he beat Mario Barrios and he beat Isaac Pitbull Cruz and Hector Garcia and all these guys. Those guys are not A-grade level fighters, and we all know that they're not A-grade level fighters. It is what it is. You get these channels that love to criticize Canelo Alvarez's resume and say he's fighting these European bums and all this other stuff and that Inoue ain't fighting nobody. Who is Gervonta Tank Davis fighting? Somehow they have Gervonta Tank Davis within their top 10 pound for pound. But Inoue and Canelo Alvarez's resume, it's fraudulent. And listen, to a degree, I can understand the perspective, especially if you're taking a look at Inoue. I get it to a degree if you have that perspective because you may not know a lot of those fighters within those lower weight classes. But if we're really going to go there, Inoue's resume is probably even better than that of Gervonta Tank Davis's. And I wouldn't say that either Inoue or Crawford really have a Floyd Mayweather or Manny Pacquiao or Canelo Alvarez type of resume where they just have, possibly a dozen A-grade level fighters on the resume. But at the end of the day, it's like, dude, who the hell is Gervonta Tank Davis fought? I mean, Mario Barrios is not an A-grade level fighter in my view. Isaac Pitbull Cruz certainly is not an A-grade level fighter. I was always proven correct on that matter. Hector Garcia is not an A-grade level fighter. And really, the majority of the fighters that he's fought have not been A-grade level fighters. To be quite honest with you, you can debate that he's never fought an A-grade level fighter. I think the closest fighter that maybe was closest to A-grade level was probably that of Ryan Garcia. And we also don't know how good he is either, because he's never been a legitimate champion. He's a great physical talent, but in terms of boxing, he has a lot of flaws. It just is what it is. It was a great build-up fight, and it was a fight that needed to happen. But is Ryan Garcia really a fighter that is going to show us how great Gervonta Tank Davis is? I don't know. But apparently, debatably, or allegedly, his next fight could be against that of William Zepeda, who in my view is just another Mexican fighter that they're bringing in, that they can sucker in a certain amount of the Mexican fan base and a certain amount of people to say, look at this, we're creating another decent fight between that of a dominant black American fighter and that of a Mexican American fighter or a Mexican fighter. Come and watch it because of this great rivalry, and they both have power and blah, 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 blah. At the end of the day, William Zepeda is not going to be able to defeat Gervonta Tank Davis. He's not going to be able to defeat Gervonta Tank Davis. Now, apparently this fight might happen on the debut of that at Amazon Prime or, whichever network is going to be playing on, I believe, because Showtime and the PBC, had to move from that to Showtime to somewhere else. So I can kind of understand this fight happening, but I just find it very particularly interesting how a lot of these LDBC and new media channels especially, and don't get me wrong, they're not the only ones with double standards, but I just find it very interesting how they always love to criticize Inoue's resume or Canelo's resume or Usyk's resume or Fury's resume, but they never criticize Gervonta Tank Davis's. Gervonta Tank Davis is allegedly the king and overall, the face of boxing when it comes down to it. Now, the face of boxing is more about your numbers. But, once again, we'll see how he does in the future. He certainly has that great potential. I would probably still say Canelo at the moment, but he certainly is right there, But anyways, we're going to review the video. Let's see what Mr. Dante has to say.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Listen, Mateo, atento Mexico. Here is the undefeated William El Trabador Cepeda.
let me also state this, because Dante and Aki and a certain amount of these guys, especially, they've always tried to fill you up with this bullshit about how Gervonta Tank Davis, the fighters that he's fighting are more competitive than some of the fighters that Canelo Alvarez is fighting, because he's fighting these white guys, and everyone knows that, white guys aren't as dominant in the sport as that, of the Mexican fighters. Right, but come on. At the end of the day, you're only fooling that of, the simple-minded people or the idiots, really, with that point. It is what it is. At the end of the day, that's like me taking a look at the NFL, or the NBA. That's like me taking a look at the NFL and saying, oh, well, you know what? Excuse me. You know what? Black quarterbacks, haven't been as dominant within that of NFL history. Time has proved again and again that, they're not usually quite as dominant. Take a look at how many Super Bowl rings they've won compared to that of Caucasian quarterbacks. So that means that against Tom Brady, that I can't count, 3 of his Super Bowls because he beat Russell Wilson, Donovan McNabb, and Patrick Mahomes in one. Like, that just doesn't make any fucking sense. At the end of the day, you have to take a look at how competitive they are and how talented they are overall for their individual sport when it comes down to it. And I'm sorry, but these guys can tell you all this bullshit that they want to, but even they know that Canelo, when he fought Caleb Plant and Billy Joe Saunders, those two fighters are a decent amount better, or at least more A grade than any of the fighters that Gervonta Tank Davis has probably ever fought during his career, besides debatably Leo Santa Cruz. It just is what it is. And I know Ryan Garcia has power and all sort of bullshit, blah blah blah. He is not overall a fully cooked boxer. He is not a guy that is an A+ level skilled kid. He's just not. He has great athleticism, but in terms of boxing ability, he has a lot of flaws. A lot of flaws. And remember, at one time, when when Billy Joe Saunders and Andrade, when they were about to fight, it was one of the biggest fights in boxing. We can't wait for this fight to get made. But then as soon as Canelo fights Billy Joe Saunders, oh, he wasn't the same fighter. Oh, he's fighting a guy with no power. Oh, this, oh, that. When it comes down. And then he fights Caleb Plant. Oh, Caleb Plant wears down, towards the course of the end of fights. Oh, this. Then Canelo knocks out Caleb Plant, and then they set up David Benavidez versus Caleb Plant, and then it's one of the biggest fights in boxing. And they're very excited for this fight. And it's going to be, one of the biggest wins of the year when David Benavidez beats him. So once again, it just goes to show you that a lot of them that, excuse me, that either A, they don't truly believe in what they're saying, or B, that they're so blinded by their hypocrisy and their racialism when it comes down to it, and racism when it comes down to it, that, they basically don't see their hypocrisy. So a lot of people always ask, oh, why are you criticizing these channels, all this sort of shit? Once again, because the hypocrisy is clearly there. And William Zepeda is not going to defeat Gervonta Tank Davis. In my view, he's just a little bit too hittable. He's way too slow compared to that of Gervonta Tank Davis. And he has good power, but Gervonta Tank Davis probably even has more punching power than him. The fights that Gervonta Tank Davis needs to start getting into, Shakur Stevenson, Teofimo Lopez, Devin Haney, even if it's Vasily Lomachenko, even though he's like 35, turning 36 this year, I think when it comes down to it, I'll even take a Vasily Lomachenko. But I'm sorry, I'm not impressed by all these little, Latino dudes, that you're fighting that clearly are nowhere near your same skill level. Like, I'm sorry. And on top of that, most of these guys have never even been a champion. Like, Mario Barrios has never been a legitimate champion. Rolly Romero ended up being a champion because of a vacant title at that of the 140-pound weight division. But we all know that Rolly Romero is really not that great of a fighter. Isaac Pitbull Cruz has never been a champion. When it comes down to Hector Garcia was a champion. But at the end of the day, is he really an elite level champion? It just is what it is. I mean, he beat Chris Colbert, I believe, or Colbert, whatever his name is. The same dude that got knocked out by Jose Valenzuela. The same dude that got knocked out in the first round by that one Dominican fighter. So it's like, come on.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So according to reports, William Zepeda is expected to return to the ring in March, and so is Gervonta Tank Davis. The truth is, if Gervonta is not taking on one of the biggest fights next, then fighting against William Zepeda would make sense. Both Gervonta and William Zepeda are 29-0. Gervonta is 29-0 with 27 knockouts. Zepeda is 29-0 with 26 knockouts. Now that Gervonta has accepted being the full-time Super WBA champion, it wouldn't be too hard to make the Williams-Zepeda fight because Zepeda is ranked number 2 in the WBA rankings, right behind Pitbull Isaac Cruz. And while a lot of fans think that Gervonta Tank Davis will be fighting Cruz next, I've always told you I don't believe he's going to take that fight because I just don't believe that fight makes sense. At least not.
I have no interest in a Gervonta Tank Davis versus Isaac Pitbull Cruz fight. To be quite honest with you, I really have no interest in a Gervonta Tank Davis versus Williams Zepeda fight because I think that it's about time that Gervonta Tank Davis finally steps in the ring with somebody, and you're only going to get away with this for so long. Even Canelo Alvarez, with as many great fighters as he has fought, there's only so many times that Canelo can fight someone like a John Ryder or someone like that. Now, I thought that Saunders and Plant, I thought that those were great fights. I also thought that the Callum Smith fight was great for the time, when it came down to it. But Canelo, no matter who he ends up fighting next, he is going to have to fight David Benavidez this year. So even Canelo Alvarez is going to deal with a certain amount of pressure. But at the end of the day, Gervonta Tank Davis, it's like, dude, you're damn near 30-0. You're reaching over to that 38-year-old mark. It's like, who the hell have you ever fought?
For Gervonta's debut on Prime Amazon. Isaac Cruz, he's done nothing to deserve a rematch. He's completely lost momentum since the first fight. If Isaac Cruz would have picked up a big win in the division to help promote a rematch against Gervonta Tank Davis, that would have made that fight easier to sell. But Cruz has been playing it too safe, cherry-picking all of his opponents just to secure another big fight against Gervonta. And while Zepeda doesn't have the best resume either, at least he is still undefeated, and he does have a good win over Jojo Diaz. Now, recently, Gervonta Tank Davis' trainer, Calvin Ford, he came out and admitted fans don't want to see the Isaac Cruz fight. His exact words was, I know fans are saying they don't want to see the Isaac Pitbull Cruz fight, but
Well, people don't really want to see the Williams Zepeda fight either, but they'll deal with it if you're a very big Gervonta Tank Davis fan, and they'll deal with it more than the Isaac Pitbull Cruz fight because Williams Zepeda, of course, has this, record of being undefeated and all sort of stuff. But once again, where is this push about, from Dante's Boxing Nation, just like he would say about Canelo Alvarez, where he would basically say, oh, overall Canelo's fighting, Jaime Munguia. No one wants to see this, even though Jaime Munguia is an undefeated fighter. And he wanted, Jaime Munguia to fight Andrade, and possibly David Benavidez. Now, in my view, I'm not really a huge fan of the Canelo versus Jaime Munguia fight either. Because I think that the main fight that needs to happen is going to be that of Canelo and David Benavidez. Now, I wouldn't mind it happening in May, as long as Canelo fights David Benavidez next. But at the end of the day, where is the push? Where is the push from that of the LDBC and new media saying, Gervonta, we don't want to see these damn B grade, C grade, little Latino, Dominican, Mexican fighters anymore. We don't want to see these guys. Where's Shakur Stevenson? Where's Teofimo Lopez? Where is Vasily Lomachenko? Where is Devin Haney? Why are you not fighting these guys? There's no push from these channels whatsoever, at least from what I've seen. Isn't that very particularly interesting?
Thing is, he has the Mexican fan base. This is pretty much what Calvin Ford said, but Williams Zepeda would have the same Mexican fan base, especially if he fights against Gervonta. So even though Davis versus Zepeda wouldn't be a super fight, it will still be a much more intriguing fight than Davis versus Cruz 2 or Davis versus Jose Arroyo Venezuela. Now, there is one fight that would be bigger than the Zepeda fight, and that would be...
I can name you several fights that would be bigger than that of the Williams Zepeda fight, Dante. I can name you several fights. Not just the ones that I mentioned, but even at 140, possibly Josh Taylor, Regis Prograis. And yes, they're coming off of losses, but at least it would be looked at as a little bit more interestingly competitive. Now, in terms of that, I don't think it's necessarily the best option right now. Because, yes, those fighters are coming off of losses, but they're still decently strong and somewhat relatively talented. And Davis is a shorter built guy. He's a guy that, he's a bit girthier for his size. Kind of like Canelo Alvarez for his, weight division, which in my view is more middleweight than what it is super middleweight or light heavyweight. But at the end of the day, Gervonta Tank Davis, he would probably need some time to accustom there. But at 135, the Shakur Stevenson fight is probably not going to happen. But at the end of the day, once again, there's just no push for Gervonta Tank Davis, once again, to fight these bigger names.
Davis versus Frank Martin. But
at least from that of these LDBC and new media channels.
because Frank Martin has been aggressively calling out William Zepeda himself recently. That makes it sound like he's not that interested in fighting against Gervonta, because it would make no sense to express interest in fighting Zepeda when you could be possibly fighting against Gervonta. So with us being in January, I'm expecting we're going to get an announcement of who Gervonta will fight in the next 2 weeks. With that being said, I'm going to wrap this video up. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one. Let me tell you guys about...
But anyways, that's pretty much about it for this video. I don't mind Gervonta Tank Davis possibly fighting William Zepeda next if I felt that he was going to fight someone very big, you know, later on. But the problem is Gervonta Tank Davis is that I just I don't see him beating anyone overall that in my view is really, really great championship level material. And when I say championship level material, I'm talking about A-grade level fighters. I'm not talking about, you know, overall these dudes that end up getting a belt because the weight division is vacant, or, you know, they end up getting a belt over a bum when it comes down to, you know, like that, you know, a Mario Barrios or Rolly Romero. So I'm not talking about those guys. I'm talking about Lomachenko. I'm talking about Shakur Stevenson. I'm talking about Teofimo Lopez. I'm talking about some of those other guys. To be honest with you, I'd probably rather see a Sandor Martin fight than that of the William Zepeda fight. I mean, William Zepeda has power and all sort of bullshit, you know, that they love to claim, but power really at the end of the day is not everything. You know, even when we take a look at Canelo versus Billy Joe Saunders and Caleb Plant, those fights were very interesting in my view because Billy Joe Saunders was at one time looked at as one of the top middleweights in the world, and he was a two-weight division champion. And there was talks about him once upon a time having big fights against Andrade and also against that of what was his name, Gennady Golovkin, you know. And also when it came to Caleb Plant, there was big fight, you know, big talks about him having a big super fight with that of David Benavidez. And even after Canelo knocked him out, it was still looked at as a super fight by many people. So at the end of the day, once again, I'm sorry, but this fight just really does not intrigue me that much. I would understand it as a debut, but Gervonta Tank Davis, in my view, he is going to have to start getting in the ring with the bigger names. And until that happens, he's probably not going to grace my top 10 pound per pound list because, in my view, he's just not fighting anybody. It just is what it is. But anyways, that's pretty much about it for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.